Mark, Ryan, hi. Fabulous to have another guest on our show, Mark. But just before we even get there, can I just say that you're looking younger? Is that possible?
Well, I crossed to the great surprise of many of my friends, I crossed the 70 years plus 10 yesterday. And if the truth be known, and this is just the truth, I didn't think I'd feel like this when I turned 70. I thought I was finished when I was 70. Truth is, I've just begun.
Okay.
And so, older, and we're all getting a bit older. Not to say anything too profound this morning. Good morning, Ryan. What a pleasure to have you here. You must have had an extraordinary weekend. I saw a bit of it on TV. It was more popular than the Masters. Well, not really, but okay. Yeah. How was it? I mean, I'm fascinated about the challenge worldwide and locally that politicians face. I mean, you've just seen what's happened in Hungary. We sort of get into dreamland and we think about how that could happen here one day. Could that happen here one day? Could we have a total takeover, a total new Broome?
Well, first of all, hello, Mark, Tim.
How's it?
Delighted to be with you guys. Could power change hands in South Africa at national level? Oh, yes, it could. I mean, it seems unlikely that there is anytime soon going to be a party that wins an outright majority by itself. I think Geordin Hill-Lewis and the broader DA leadership at the weekend made it very clear the ambition is to be the biggest party in South Africa and have a bigger influence over the shape of the future of the country. But before we get round to a national change in power, I mean, we've got these local government elections coming up towards the end of the year or the beginning of next year. There's going to be a big shift there. I mean, the DA is on course to be the biggest party in a number of metros, obviously some other councils as well, and probably back into coalition territory in some of those. But things are changing. Things are shifting. So yes, what happened in Hungary was important for Europe, obviously, but things are moving here as well.
Ryan, not to put you on the spot or anything, but what's your prediction?
No, we would never do that.
No, we would never do that. I mean, it does seem as though there could be a kind of a very tense alliance between Action SA and the DA that could run Joburg. But is that conceivable?
Well, look, I mean, can't know the answer to that question yet, and I also it's too soon to tell. I don't think the Democratic Alliance itself has decided how it wants to approach the formation of governments after these local elections, partly because the numbers dictate to some extent what kind of governments you can get. If things go very well in a Tshwane, for example, the DA might win a majority, so the question's moot. In some other places, coalitions might be required. And, I'm sure there's discussion and thought about it going on, but the actual results make a huge difference to what's possible. I mean, the DA gets as low as, let's say, 35 in Johannesburg. That forces the DA to think about certain approaches to putting a government together. If it gets 45, well, different kind of government might be possible. So there's no point really working all this out before the vote's in.
But we really have a lot of tails wagging dogs in these coalition governments. I mean, if I go to my world of business, minorities have rights. They have rights which protect them, but don't necessarily empower them to guide the fortune. They get protected. They get, okay, guys, we can't do this to you. We can't take that away from you without all of those good things. That's how it happens in business. If you're the controlling shareholder, there's a hell of a lot you can do. And if you've got 25 plus 1%, there's a hell of a lot you can stop. But it seems to me that in politics, the way the council seats come together and so on, you can have a very tiny swing vote controlling the flow of the whole current. I mean, that is surely flawed in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yes. Well, look, it's a normal democratic practice around the world, but it's flawed in the sense that it's very difficult to do unless you're working with people who are serious about governing. And listen, guys, I am not in a position to speak on behalf formally of the DA.
No, we're not asked. We're talking in general.
Yeah, but I would say that I think it's quite clear that the DA is tired of the sort of small party that is driven by the wrong kind of impulses, positions, ego, and constantly looking for advantage, which is why you see these governments fall and new coalitions form halfway through the terms. I mean, you need the right policy agenda. That is the most important thing for a government. and then you need the right execution. But stability helps. It helps when you have 5 years in which to implement. I mean, Mark, you know this from the post office. Broken things don't get fixed overnight. So it doesn't help that instead of putting together a plan for 5-10 years, driving a policy agenda, executing properly, you spend your time on internal politics inside a coalition because people are playing games. So I think the DA is really keen to avoid that going forward, if at all possible. It's not always possible. And to put together governments that are stable and that can make a change. And I think that's the way they think about it. But the problem you describe is entirely accurate description.
Ryan, so one other question. I mean, we're asking you this because you've previously been an advisor to the DA. We're not asking you for, DA, gospel. And I guess some of these questions are sort of quite hard because you're still kind of a little bit associated with the DA, I suppose. But I just wondered what you thought Geordin Hill-Lewis brings to the party that John Steenhuisen doesn't. Or maybe, was there parts that John Steenhuisen brought? I mean, I've been thinking a lot about leadership recently on account of the fact that I never do it. So that always helps, I think. If you have no experience at all in something, then you can talk authoritatively about it and write columns about it for the newspaper. But I do think one of the things about leadership, and sort of, Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that you have to be likable. And actually, I never really found John Steenhuisen likable. I don't know how important that is. Or maybe you shouldn't be likable. Maybe you should be eminently hateable. There are leaders in the world at the moment that I've noticed who people actually don't like very much, and they seem to be doing fine. What's your position on the likability issue?
Yeah, well, first look, all leaders are different. They have their strengths and weaknesses. I've known all the DA and DP leaders going back to Colin Eglin, via Zach, Tony, Helen, Moosey, John, and Geordin. So, they all have their strengths and their weaknesses. I think Geordin is likable, and I think likability is critical in democratic circumstances. But and it's a good point you make, because I think you're already seeing this on social media. People who are not DA supporters saying, kind of like him. And some of them are saying, I kind of like him and it's annoying. Because I don't want to like the leader of the DA, but I find I can't help myself with this guy. And I think that's a real thing with him. But that's not enough. I mean, as I'm sure you didn't imply otherwise, but being likable is not enough. You need a lot of attributes to be a very successful leader. And if you think about the DA's circumstances today, they're very complicated. So, as you know, I'm good friends with Tony. Tony was a brilliant leader. But, when we, in 94, the scale of the challenge was vast because we had 1.7%, and Business Day, Tim, you might recall, famously described the party as a desolate shack. And so that was a challenge. But what was easy...
You didn't do that, did you?
Well, I don't know
Really?
if... I don't,
The trouble with print media, it stays there forever, put. Okay, be careful.
It does, but if they're wrong, the difference, Mark, is that if a columnist is wrong, they just write another column next week. It doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah. They should be the politicians.
Sorry, Tim, we're not going to pick on you. But anyway, look, the scale of that challenge in 94 was enormous, but the job was very simple. We weren't in government or remotely close to government anywhere, and we had to wake up in the morning and think about how to, provide constructive opposition in a new democracy. So there was one job. So, that famous saying, you've got one job. Now, if you think about the situation the lead of the DA is in, we have a number of governments in every sphere, local, national, provincial. Some of those are outright majorities. Some of those are coalitions. We also obviously operate in parliament. And so getting this beast that the DA has become to mix my metaphors, getting the planes to fly in formation, let's leave the beast aside, is a job, a difficult job under these.
What, Tim? These DA oaks are quite smart, with all their stuff, and the metaphors.
I know, those analogies, Jesus, they just roll off the tongue.
I'm now starting to think, can cows fly? You know what I'm saying? That's where I've got to.
Well, yeah. Well, if you can get cows to fly, you'll definitely succeed in politics.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's difficult, Geordin, and so for Geordin to be successful, being likable is critical, and he is likable, and this is one of his big talents, but he's got so many others. I think he's a generational talent, and I'll say that up front. It's my strong belief that he's a generational talent as a political leader in South Africa and for the DA. But time will tell. I did tell him the story, a famous story of Bradman walking out to bat in the Ashes in the 30s. And he walked past Len Hutton, I think it was, at Middelf, and the crowd was going wild, and Hutton said, well, they love you, Don. And Bradman famed, she said, well, let's see what they say on the way back. And he got out cheaply and they were silent on the way back. So,
Yeah.
you might be a talent, you might be a Bradman, but you still got to put the runs on the board. No pressure on Geordin. But I do actually think he's a generational talent.
Well, I'd have the following criticisms of populism, or democracy in general, for that matter. I mean, two things. By definition, it's a measure of the lowest common denominator, arguably. I mean, eventually the broad masses elect someone to lead them. But more importantly, in our context, in our country, I've said this more than once, you can't become a dentist by the popular vote. We need expertise, we need leadership, and to go to the question of popularity, I mean, some of the world's most extraordinary leaders have not done popular things, but they've done things which were right and deserve it. I mean, Lincoln would be a classic example. There was a book written about his whole world called, A Team of Rivals. And we have exactly that challenge in South Africa. We need to create a team of rivals. And if you look to the success we can all claim to be part of, the Springbok rugby team, it's a team of rivals. It's a team made out of people who play against each other for most of the year and for each other occasionally, because there is a higher purpose. There is a common cause. And absent a common cause, you can't create a team of rivals. I reflect on a current case, Capitec. Everyone thinks Capitec just pitched up one day. Capitec started 25 plus years ago. It takes an extraordinary amount of time, to your earlier point, Ryan, to get a deep, meaningful strategy to manifest. And that's the time, it seems to me, that no leader has had. I mean, Johannesburg, as a classic example, it's had 11 mayors in 10 years or whatever the number is. And you just can't do anything when your entire life is focusing on each other instead of the issue at hand.
Absolutely.
And how do we escape that?
So, and I haven't thought about that. But before I get to it, just to say this, because I think it's quite an important point about democracy and how different it is from business. Ultimately, the point of democracy is to provide for legitimacy, not efficiency. And the second point of democracy and the things that go along with it, the division of powers and so on, is to do risk management, so that when things are going in the wrong direction, something comes along to stop it from going in the wrong direction. And in most countries, if you look at it historically, I think that providing legitimacy and risk management has led to greater efficiency and therefore better outcomes in most democracies in the world. I think not all, in fairness. But that's actually the point of democracy. It's very different from the point of a business. Having said all of that, when democracy doesn't work, it's because I think the leadership class in a country isn't serious enough and isn't inspired by the right values. So there are countries in the world where there are very big differences of view about policy, ideology, the future, but the country is, by all of the different parties in those countries, seen to be the most important thing. The differences are largely authentic differences, and aren't about personality or patronage or access to resource or all of those kinds of things. So in that context, you can have a situation where parties change as different parties come in and out, but the place is run in a serious way. And I think one of the big divides in South African politics, I mean, there are many divides, and you can describe the divides in different ways, but one of the divides is actually just between serious people and unserious people.
And ignorance and knowledge. There's a huge divide there.
Well, yes. But I mean, and I think there are some serious people in the ANC, and by serious, I don't mean to say I agree with them. But I do think I think Cyril Ramaphosa wants South Africa to be successful. I don't think he necessarily always goes right about that in the right way. This is why we're in different parties. But I do think he does want that. Do I think everybody in the ANC is serious about that? No. I mean, quite a lot of people are serious about their own personal circumstances. And I think some of the smaller parties you mentioned earlier, which are really built around individual personalities and provide individuals with a platform for their personal ambitions. Well, you see, if you create a party like that, it's difficult for it to be a serious party that is serious about the country and about its future.
Why? But Ryan, why do these parties last? What is it? What is the enduring, raison d'etre for a party that self-evidently is not acting in the country's best interest and is acting in individuals' best and is corrupt and all of those good things? How come it goes on?
Mark, haven't you answered your own question? Isn't Isn't that exactly what the problem is that people put their own interests first? And
Yeah,
that's
but why did the
one of
others
the
vote for
reasons
them,
why
Tim?
people go into politics, and one of the reasons why people endure in politics, and why, non-seriousness
Yeah.
pervades, is because if you've
Yeah.
got that avenue, if you've got the possibility of improving your own life circumstances, it's a very hard thing to turn down. It's easy to kind of, sort of castigate it morally. But if you're, if you're in that position, it's very hard to ignore the lure, surely. Yeah.
No, but
So-
I mean, what I'm saying is, Tim, surely evidence would suggest that continuing with those people at your helm has brought you nothing to date. So why
Yes.
continue?
Yes. And look, this is $1 million question. Mark's asking a really important question, I think. And by definition, any party that gets votes means that some people have identified with that party and its leader. As inconceivable as that might be, or incomprehensible as it might be to me or you, that clearly is what's happening. And I think in South Africa's democracy, how they became democracies are different, right? There's a lot in South Africa that revolves around identity, history, how history and identity intersect, how people perceive their interests. So, the classic idea of Western liberal democracy is that people act in their own interests. And so you pitch to them how you're going to help them, and they decide who they think is going to help them best, and that's who they vote for. And when people talk about those interests, they generally tend to mean implicitly economic interests, which is what Western democracies were like for periods of time in their history. But actually, even in the West, I say even in the West, I mean, to some extent, especially in the West today, people vote for people who do not act in their own interests because they identify with them about something that doesn't have to do with their
Right,
interests.
I'm going to
Look at
interrupt you to say, I think we've got special circumstances, and they're not, and I've often quoted this, they're not different to the circumstances that Israel once had. When Golda Meir, the then, a leader, said, Israel will not succeed or be prosperous until we love our future more than we hate our past. And I think we are cursed with that, lus. In Afrikaans, we used to call it the lus, package of stuff that you've got to pick up every morning and take with you wherever you go. And it seems to be increasingly, as elections appear on the horizon, that we refer to our divided past to seek allegiance. And therein lies the conundrum for me, because as we're approaching local municipal elections, other than parties all focusing on each other instead of on, the subject matter, they're all focusing on race and issues of division, with some notable exceptions. Okay, and
exactly.
it's those issues of division which overrule your present circumstances and bring out your causes of the past. And until we emerge from that chasm, we're never going to do anything. We're just going to
100%.
harvest. We're
Can I
never
just,
going to plant.
we've spoken quite a lot about age on this podcast, and it's a very appropriate moment since Mark has now, earned his sort of big title. But
Yeah.
the interesting
Don't
thing,
tell
one of
everyone,
the
Tim,
things
I'm
that
still pretending.
Oh, I see. Okay. One of the things that commentators did notice about the DA's new leadership structure is that it is actually quite young. I mean, it's much younger, except for the fact that both of the opposition contenders for Johannesburg are in their 70s. But apart from that,
Yes, and listen, a lot of people have commented on that, and it's noteworthy. I think it's important in that it shows the DA's got the ability to renew its leadership, right? So I think that's important. But I actually don't think the age of these folk is the most important thing. To go back to Mark's point, the most important thing, I don't know, Mark, if you or Tim managed to watch Geordin's speech, because I think it was a fundamental break with the DA's past for the following reason. Well, first of all, he didn't talk about the ANC. Didn't talk about the
Yeah.
ANC. So,
Good for him.
and it's a big shift that's happening here. If you're a party of opposition, you talk about the governing party. That's kind of what oppositions do. You go, these guys are bad. If you are a party of government, you see yourself as a party of government, you are addressing yourself to the majority of the people in the country, then you talk to them and about their lives and their needs. You don't talk about other parties. One of the most striking things about his speech is he didn't talk about the ANC. He spoke about South Africa and South Africa's people. And secondly, he talked about, sure, the problems of the present, but what to do about them into the future. And so I think that's a huge shift for the DA. I think it's critical. It's who he is.
We have to move away from relative performance to absolute performance. I mean, it's just how it is.
Right. And well, indeed, because I mean, when people start saying to me, we've turned the corner because we're going to get 1.4% growth, I start to
Oh.
despair. But anyway, so I think the important thing, Tim, about this new group of leaders is that they are less burdened by the baggage of the past, very focused on the future. And I think the DA under Geordin Hill-Lewis is going to be more focused on what to do about the future of South Africa and less focused on telling people the ANC is bad. By the way, just in terms of the DA's strategic situation, right, and its electoral situation, telling people that the ANC is bad and is doing bad things and is running the country badly, or the city or the council, whatever it is does not come as a surprise to the voters. It's not as if they didn't know the ANC is bad and you've just broken this terrible news to them. They know this already. And quite a lot of people who think the ANC is bad and that the DA is actually better at running governments do not vote for the DA. So you've got to ask yourself, well, why not? To your point earlier, Mark, if you actually think the DA would run your council, your town, your city better, you're right, at the end of this year, why wouldn't you vote for the DA? Well, if you're not going to vote for the DA, then the DA's got to ask itself, well, why not? What do we need to do differently? And Mark, one can complain about the voters, but it's a waste of effort if you're in politics. It's a democracy, and it's Geordin's job to work out how to win them over. And I think he's very focused on that. And his point about trust, especially with more black voters than the DA currently wins over, who think the DA is good, think it's good at running councils and towns and the Department of Home Affairs and whatnot. They think very good, but aren't voting for the DA. So that bridge has to be crossed. And Geordin's very focused on doing that.
Yeah, but he's very focused on. It's like this old question, that the DA has respect but not support, and the reason for that is what Mark was talking about earlier about loving your future more than your past. And everyone always says, well, the DA should do something about that. What exactly? You know what I mean? I think you have to wait for the society to change.
Yeah, but I think leaders need to change
Leaders should
society.
address that. Yeah. Okay.
And so, Geordin addresses some of this in his speech, but what to do about it? I think, when you simply attack the ANC all the time, when you give off the feeling as the leader that the emotion that drives you is anger. Leaders have many emotions, some of them, lots of them. But if the feeling people have is the primary emotion is anger, that all you want to talk about is how bad the ANC is, then you don't build identification, you don't build a rapport, you don't build an emotional connection with voters. You do that when you focus on them. So if you just look at the way Geordin operates in Cape Town, look at what he did just yesterday in Johannesburg, and I think today he's in Tshwane or where he is today. He loves it, right? He loves to be on the ground, talking to people. He said something in his speech, we must listen before we give an answer. Yeah, we mustn't be giving people the answer before.
I'm going to try that one day. I really am.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
People, forget about it. So what's this business of 2 ears, 1 mouth? Use them in that proportion.
And also, and can I say one other thing, because it's really important?
Okay.
It's not just, sometimes people look at the positions parties take, the policy agenda. But the most voters, if you've got 100 policy positions, how many of those do most voters know? So what becomes important is what you choose to foreground. And what happens in parties is that what you choose to foreground is driven by your feelings about where your passion lies. And that is why what's inside is what the voters eventually see on the outside. Mark, it's like a business and a brand, right? The truth about the inside of that entity will end up being what the consumer or the customer picks up. You can try to hide it and manage it away, but what is the culture? What is the offering? That comes out. And so if you just wake up and you're angry and you tell them the ANC is bad and you focus on that tells people something about you. So to your question, Tim, because I'm trying to actually answer your question, I think the approach that I'm describing and that he implements is how you build support and a connection with voters who might think you're good, but don't currently vote for you.
Well, I'll tell you what they'll all need. They'll all need competence and time. And time is something we've run out of, guys.
No, this is true.
Even us.
So
let's hope we get enough common purpose to make the hard decisions to start the journey towards prosperity for everybody. That's we can hope for, and it'll only happen when we focus on the country, not on ourselves and each other. Have a good week, guys. I think we run out of time, Tim.
Yeah, we definitely
Thanks,
have.
Ryan.
Ryan, thanks for joining us. It was a thrill. Please do join us again whenever you feel like it. Yeah, no, great chat. Thanks everyone, and have a good week all.
Cool, guys.